All right. Dr. Rosemary Otalor is a seasoned marketing, communications, and public relations consultant with over 14 years of experience shaping brands and reputations across Africa. She holds degrees from Olabisi Onabanjo University, the School of Media and Communications, Pan Atlantic University, University of Lagos, and a doctorate in strategic management from Rome Business School. She has led high-impact communications and brand strategies for leading organizations across Africa, building a strong reputation in corporate communications and stakeholder engagement. 20 moments, please. Beyond her impressive corporate portfolio, Dr. Rosemary is deeply committed to advancing women and the African continent through knowledge, mentorship, and empowerment. She is a respected industry professional and active member of key communications bodies. She is passionate about women's education, mentoring, and creating meaningful impact through leadership and service. Dr. Rosemary Otalor will be speaking on owning your story, using storytelling to shape your identity and influence. Welcome, Dr. Rosemary. The stage is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. I was trying to unmute myself. Oh, wow. Thank you for that, very gracious introduction. I was like, is that me? Don't mind me. I have some slides that I would like to share. I just left the classroom, so it's in my usual nature to want to share, my speaking slides. So please permit me to quickly share my slides. Just a few slides to speak on the topic. Yes, I think it's up now. And by the way, I have a friend here, James. James is from Uganda or so, I think. I was amazed seeing him on the call because we had like a Pan-Africa engagement, with one of the brands that I used to manage. So James, I see you. Thank you for joining. So, like the speaker said, my name is Dr. Rosemary Otalor, and I'll be speaking very briefly on owning your story, using storytelling to shape your identity and influence. As a communicator, storytelling, I mean, I know the power of storytelling. Brands spend millions, billions, ensuring that they're able to tell the story about their brand, just so that they can, achieve their objectives and goals. Storytelling is that powerful. It can make you, it can break you, can build your reputation, it can spoil your reputation, and for centuries, I mean, it didn't start now, even individuals have used the power of storytelling, to change societies, right? To change situations. So, I mean, I listened to the first speaker, Dr. Olushola, and I was just nodding my head because our topic is quite similar. And just to ensure that, especially for women, that we ensure that we really, really use the power of storytelling to, change our narrative. And I'm saying this because, apologies to the men here. I know there's some men here with my family members. Men will say 2. No, men will say 10 and do 2. Women will do 10 and say 2. Like, why is it peculiar? Why is it particularly about women not wanting to tell their stories? Why are they always afraid to own their narratives? If you sit in a circle of men, they don't find it difficult, be it the boardroom, wherever they are. For women, for some strange reasons that we're still trying to, perception that we're still trying to change, we keep doing this. And Dr. Shola said something that I picked, projecting visibility is not vanity, because sometimes that is what some people, based on some few research. They're like, my story is not good enough. What story do I have? Why should I speak? Oh, I'm too ashamed to tell these stories. Not knowing that for every story you tell authentically, someone's life is being impacted. Whether you know it or not, yours is to tell the story. So I'll just be telling us on how to, a few tips on how to own our stories and use it for our identity and influence. And I have a question here, something for us to just ponder on for a few seconds. Who told you who you are? Dr. Shola talked about labels. For me, when I was growing up, they said, I used to argue a lot. They said, because I don't know, I was little then. And was it my father or mother? They started calling me something, a lawyer Maido or something. My husband will laugh if he hears that I'm sharing this. And believe it or not, that label shaped me such that when I finished school, I wasted 2 extra years just because I wanted to study law. I had nobody to guide me to say, you know what, you can do other things. I wanted to do law, and then LASU was the best in law. Like, it was LASU or nothing. And because of that, 2 years at home, rejected offers from Unilag and one other school because I wanted to be a lawyer. I grew up with that label, like, they used to use it back then, not in a positive way. It was actually in a negative light, but that label just stuck. And it shaped me up until I became self-aware enough to, change that label. And I'm asking this question because some of us, who we are was defined by, people, maybe teachers. Sometimes I hear, she's very cool and calm. Even when you look for her trouble, she doesn't say anything. And this thing sticks. Why? If you think about it now, those labels, even us, we do it unconsciously because that's the sort of society that we are in. Just create labels. And children are growing up with these labels, good or bad. And whether I would like it or not, these labels, are shaping the way they think, the way they grow into functioning adults. So it's a question that, you can answer in the comment section. We'll look at it, but think about it. And I asked a couple of questions here. Have you ever been labeled before you could define yourself? Just like I was. Who shaped your earliest beliefs about your potential? Was it your teacher? Was it your parent? And then what story are you currently living in? Is it yours? Or is it the ones that you were told? Questions for you to think. And I say you are who you say you are. Because at the end of the day, we are the authors of our stories, regardless of labels that, were ascribed to us when we're growing or whatever. We are the authors of our story. Recently, I've been attending quite a number of interviews, and this organization stood out to me because they are an advocacy organization, and what they're into is about changing the narrative, the African story. For as long as I've known, when they talk about Africa, when they show pictures of Africa, whether it's in the movies or books, it's always famine, crisis, mostly. Let me not say always, mostly crisis, famine, deficits in infrastructure, this, that, always in the negative. And people telling those stories are not usually Africans. So we are being told our stories. And whether I like it or not, these stories stayed. And storytelling is infrastructure. Storytelling, narrative is actually infrastructure in the sense that investors can come or stay away just based on what they know about you, based on the stories. Your economy, the basic tenets of the economy can be affected just by the stories that people tell. And Africa is where it is today because of the stories. I know it's changing because, if you mention Nigeria anywhere, they'll tell you, oh, they're fraudsters, they're this, they're that. But they also tell you Nigerians are resilient, they are hardworking, they are unique, because social media has helped, to push a bit more of these positive stories. And it's time. The time has come for us to take back our narratives. So why do stories matter? I've touched on it a bit. Stories shape everything because stories shape beliefs. Beliefs shapes our actions, and our actions definitely shapes our destiny. Your life often reflects the stories that you believe. If you grow up thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. I mean, even as adults, because when we mentor teens and children, you can do everything, see yourself as strong, you're bold, you're beautiful. I mean, we are informed enough right now as parents to want to, build a very strong mindset, for our children, teenagers, and all. It wasn't like that, before. Maybe again, social media has helped, and we're just a bit wiser, right now. So imagine telling a child you are capable of learning. Don't worry. All your failures are just learning points. They are lessons. Don't look at them as failures. They are lessons. And you're able to build that strong mindset in that child. Just imagine the sort of adult that the child will grow up to be. Stories are powerful, especially the ones that we tell ourselves. Because all this time I'm talking about, stories that we hear, but the ones, especially the ones that we tell ourselves. And the ones that we tell ourselves sometimes, most oftentimes, come from, what we hear externally. They're externally influenced. Because you can't keep telling someone, whether directly or indirectly, you're not good enough, and the person will sit and believe that he or she is good enough. No. The stories impact, they influence. And so if you're there, maybe like me, you grew up in a situation or circumstance that, you're always surrounded by, negative talks, negative environment, negative stories. But somehow you have been able to push yourself out. I say congratulations, because you are the author of your story. Regardless of a background, regardless of a situation, you can change your story. You can own your story and use it to create the identity that you want for yourself and influence people positively. Now, I mean, I've also touched a bit about, the stories that women have been told, even up till now. I mean, in this big 2026, there's still countries that are taking the rights away from women. Don't talk. In fact, you don't want to hear your voice. Cover your face. Don't speak. Don't go to school. Stay small. You can't lead. You're not meant to be seen. You cannot challenge the system. I mean, in Nigeria, it's not that bad, thank God. But still, in the small places, our communities, our areas, our culture, our environment, they might not be, like I said, explicit, but somehow this still remains true. We want women to stay small, to stay quiet, to not challenge the system. Even in workplaces, it still happens. However, just like Dr. Lushola said, because I know she said, something around it. Every single time a woman tells her story, the world shifts. Because women are just unique or powerful. We are the bedrock. If you go to any society where women are given the opportunities to speak freely, to be involved, where their parliaments are made, mostly of women, or at least have a good representation, those societies are usually very forward-thinking, very progressive. It's not rocket science. We're created differently. There's a way we think and do things. We make things happen. If a woman becomes the president of Nigeria today, you see what will happen. But we're ready to have a female president. Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, again, for the men here, my apologies. So that doesn't look like we are antagonizing. But today is our day, and we're going to make the most of it. So to my next slide, what does owning your story mean? Ownership is power. Owning your story means accepting your past, reframing your struggles, defining yourself intentionally, and speaking your truth unapologetically. Some of us believe that, if our stories are not good, then it's not worth sharing. That's in fact, people relate and connect more to authentic stories. Just 2 days ago, the Nigerian Institute of Marketing in Nigeria had their maiden program, Lead Her. So they brought the creme de la creme of the marketing industry, just women who were like the top of the echelon in predominantly male, dominated industries. And one lady, I don't want to mention her name, but she's the CEO of, she's the only female CEO of that industry. I mean, it's purely male dominated. And then she was talking about how she struggles with imposter syndrome, how sometimes she makes mistakes, how sometimes she was like, at the end of the day, this woman is as ordinary as I am. I can relate. It means that I can also achieve whatever it is that she has achieved and more. I mean, she's a mother like me. She's this like me. She was open and vulnerable, and you could feel the way people connected with her story. So imagine if she comes on and say, and I mean, we already know her pedigree, but she comes on and starts talking about, all just her wins, her achievements. I mean, people would admire her more, want to make her a mentor or be inspired to be like her. But I'm not sure the connection will be that tight, that visible. The connection was powerful because we were able to relate. We were able to see ourselves in her. She was vulnerable enough to share what it is that we don't even see on, because social media, I mean, nobody goes there and posts it's the best pictures, the best this. I mean, people are changing strategies now, but it's usually like that. I just tend to feel like your story must be very straight, it must be this. No. And we all have different stories. The goal is owning it, your unique story, the story that makes you, you. And that's how people can connect. And then reframing your struggles. For someone else, it can be, oh, I failed. Another person will be, oh, I learned something. For someone else, it can be, oh, something negative. I usually use this analogy. I say, two children can have an alcoholic as a father, and one will grow up being an alcoholic, and one will grow up being successful in future. The same example, but two different outcomes. And that's exactly how it is. When you frame your struggles, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are denying it. You're denying the obstacles. You're just putting it in a way that will serve your purpose, in a way that would be a motivating factor for you to keep going on. I mean, it's easier said than done, because when you're going through that phase, I mean, it's difficult. Is it struggles, in terms of career? Is it in terms of your marriage? Women go through a lot, There's the issue of you're not married, you're 30, you're not married, you are this, you're that. There's always one thing or the other that is plaguing us and plaguing our sanity and our peace of mind. But when we start reframing our struggles, it starts becoming inspirational for people. It starts becoming something that people listen to, and they are motivated to be better versions of themselves. So, and then I said ownership turns pain into purpose. Failure becomes feedback, and then fear becomes fuel, something to push you into attaining your objectives. And I know I've mentioned this, sparingly. Every story has 3 parts, majorly. And I'm bringing my, communication skills to bear here on how to own your story, make it your identity, just framing your story generally. There's always the beginning, where you started. There's always the struggle, the challenges that you faced, and then there's the growth, who you became. So I termed it the 3 parts of your story, because at the end of the day, why we are here is for us to own our stories and be able to tell it, to influence people positively, and to create the identity that we want, the positive identity that we want. So I'm going into how we can do that. So there are 3 parts to every story: the beginning, the struggle, and the growth. Like I said, the beginning is where you started. There's always a point. And in our lives, there's always this circle. There'll always be a beginning, the struggle, the growth. It goes round and round. As long as we are alive, every challenge will have a beginning. There will be the challenge itself, and then there will be the growth, the learnings, what you became from that situation. Did it kill you, in quotes, or did it make you grow? Did it refine you? Like gold. Gold will go through, I mean, every what they call pearl. I mean, what's the word for it now? Precious stones must go through some process of refinement. It's like that. There is no jumping that process. Some people will say they are lucky, the process wasn't too long, but there's still no jumping that process, So the interesting part is that the most powerful part of the story is often the struggle. It is that challenge that you went through. That is usually the most interesting part. And most often for women, that is the part that we're ashamed to tell. The irony of it all. Because that is where people will see themselves. That is where people will be able to relate and know that, oh, they're not the only ones going through these things. And when people are able to see their stories, see themselves in you, that is where the connection happens. That is where the influence happens. So let's talk about, very quickly about how to rewrite your narrative. Like I said earlier, you are the author of your narrative. Same event, different story. Like the example I gave. You can say, instead of saying, I failed, it can be, I learned. So you have gone through that, the beginning, you've gone through that challenge, and you have learned something. You did not fail. Yes, they didn't pick you for that job because of something. Okay, maybe you need to go back to school. Or okay, maybe you need to prepare well for your interview. Or okay, maybe now you know that there is, a skill that you need to learn. Oh, you were fired from your good paying job. Oh, maybe now you know what you should do or not do in the corporate world. There are always lessons for every failure. I was rejected. Maybe you were redirected. I mean, we've heard stories of how, people went for something, they were rejected, not knowing that God was just trying to, shield them from catastrophe in future. Events that would have maybe finished them, killed them, not make them come back or bounce back. And God strategically redirected them. But to them, some people say, oh, I was rejected, not knowing that it was just redirection. Some people will say, I'm behind. Oh, my friends are, they are doing this, they grow their career, they are this, they are married, they have cars, they have happy marriages. I'm here, I have not done this, I've not done that. I mean, women, we can complain too. But what if you're just building? You're in the process. You're not behind. You're building, your story is unfolding. So it's important that we reframe our narrative, that we rewrite our narrative so that we can tell stories that will really, really influence people positively. And like I mentioned before, reframing is not denial, it's empowerment. The same situation, the same event, different story. So are you going to be the one that will say, I failed, or I learned? I was rejected, or I was redirected? You are the author of your story. Now, why does storytelling, why storytelling creates influence? And I mean, how? So again, something from what Dr. Shola, said earlier, people will forget facts, and that's the truth, but people will remember stories. I'm a Christian, so I would easily use, the Bible as an example. The Bible is filled with stories. So imagine if the Bible is filled with just statistics. How are we going to remember? You have stories for everything. The widow, the story of the prodigal son. Stories are things that we remember easily than statistics, because they build connection, they build trust, they inspire, and they influence. And this is why it is important for us to tell our stories. And then we should tell our stories with courage and vulnerability. Like I said earlier, your stories don't have to be perfect to be powerful. It just has to be authentic, real, true to you and the situation. Because, not two stories are like, yes, there might be similarities. People can go through, almost similar circumstances. But believe me, every story is unique. And the impact that story will leave in the minds and hearts of people will always be different. As long as it is authentic, it will create a connection. If you are vulnerable enough, because vulnerability takes courage. Not everybody has the courage to go tell their stories of failure. How do you want them to look at me? How do you want them to see me, hold me? I cannot say it, or I cannot tell it this way. Let me garnish it. Let me, I can't be that vulnerable, because the society is not what's the word now? Society is not, I'm trying to look for the right word, not nice to people who are very vulnerable, because they can use it against you. It has happened several times in relationships, one-on-one relationships, communities. They'll use it against you. That's fine, because it is still part of the story. But you need to have the courage to be vulnerable, to tell your stories anyway. So I said it before, storytelling helps you build trust. It helps to inspire action. You're telling your story that there's someone there who was second guessing, herself. And you have told this story, like, you know what? I think I need to take action. A lot of times I've seen people's story like, you know what? I need to just personally, stories that have inspired me to take action. And then when you become that sort of storyteller, you establish leadership. You become a leader. I mean, leadership comes with influence. Influence comes with, it's pari passu. It goes together. Because you might look at us and say, you're not a leader. Who says? When you start telling stories to inspire, you're engaging people. People are being inspired to take action. They're connecting with you. You are a leader. And then creating impact becomes the next step. Because when people are impacted by your story, it transforms lives. So facts-informed stories transform. I've talked about courage to be seen. Again, something that Dr. Ushola mentioned earlier. Visibility is not vanity. Sometimes as women, we do not have the courage to be seen. We just want to be. I struggle with it. I'm still struggling with it because I don't want to talk. Yes, I know my job requires me to, advise my clients to be visible. You have to be strategic. People need to see you and see you in a particular light. You have to be seen to be this. I advise people. It is what I do. But when it comes to me, my brand, me personally, I struggle. Because I'm like, must I go talk? Must I talk about it? Oh, okay, fine, I handle this project. Maybe I'll talk about something else. And I just kept doing that over and over again. But the truth is, as women, we must tell our stories. Men don't find it difficult to do that. Like I said, they don't do as much, but they talk much more. So why shouldn't we, as women? We need to have the courage to be seen. It's not being proud. It's not vanity. It's just being there to inspire, to transform. Now, vulnerability is strength, like I mentioned earlier. That weakness, that thing that you think that is weakness and that you think that is peculiar to you, is what someone wants to see and learn from when you go tell that story. So, I've mentioned this earlier, women have often been told, but influence requires visibility. How do you want to influence if you don't tell your story? If people don't hear about you, how do you want to influence? What impact do you want to make? Because impact begins when you start being visible. You have the courage enough to tell your story, to be vulnerable about it, to own it, to accept your past, to accept your failures, to show people what you have become, how those experiences have refined you to be who you are. That's where influence is. And telling your story over time becomes identity. So sometimes, when we tell when we advise clients, like, you know what, repetition matters because, when you keep what you say over time, across your platforms, if you say, you are good, I keep saying you are good, everywhere you go, I am good, I'm good. People start looking at you as being good. I mean, it's not rocket science, it's just basic psychology. When you see a brand, what comes to mind is what the brand has said about itself, first and foremost. And that's why when you see someone want to create communication like press releases, there's always this opening statement that you see about a brand. You just check it out. You see, take a press release about a brand, maybe take like 5 press releases about a brand, pick a popular brand. You see that the opening statements are usually very similar because they will always start with their core values, their strengths, whatever, the biggest supplier of this, the best in this. It is reinforcement because whatever you say over time becomes the narrative out there. So you are who you say you are consistently in your messaging. And this is just a simple framework so that I don't, take too much of your time because I know I'm delving into brand building but it's all connected, really. A simple story framework. You can share your story in 3 steps, like I said earlier, the challenge, the lesson, the purpose. And this is a simple formula. I went through this, it taught me this. Now I use it to do this. You can fill in the gaps. I want you to, use your own examples, and put it in the comment section. Maybe we'll have some time to, talk about it later. Now, I won't end my slides without talking about some common, storytelling mistakes that we make as women, and just generally oversharing without purpose. So, in as much as you want to be vulnerable, you want to tell your story authentically to influence, to create an identity for yourself, oversharing without a purpose is a no-no. You don't just go about talking for talking's sake. And most times, I mean, if you're on social media, if you're on Instagram, where a lot of people like to, tell stories, different strategies, you see it. You connect with some much more than others, because some just feel like, oh, this is just all talk. There really wasn't anything that was relatable. There wasn't really purpose. You know when someone is just all fluff and no depth, or just doing it for doing sake. That's not what storytelling in this context should be. Also playing the victim forever. Some of us, because yes, we have stories to tell, bad circumstances or situations that happened to us in the past that has made us who we are, but then you're telling the story and you're always playing the victim. You cannot play the victim forever. That is a common mistake that I see. You can only be the victim for so long. Then making yourself the hero only. Sometimes people do this unconsciously. I didn't know that it's your story. You're actually the hero of that story. But making yourself the hero only, there is no way in life where you tell your stories that there are no actors. Someone who helped, someone who encouraged, someone who did something that, sprung you to the next level. When we tell authentic stories, let us always try to be balanced. Sometimes it is about us, but not totally about us, if you know what I mean. Do not always make yourself the hero only. And then hiding the lesson. So you have told these beautiful stories, the challenge, the obstacle, the beginning, like I said, 3 parts, the beginning, the challenge and the outcome. But you've done a fantastic job talking about, the beginning, the challenge, and then the outcome is lost somewhere. That's a mistake to avoid. Always make sure the lesson is clear. Because at the end of the day, that is the takeout. That is the call to action. That is where people will say, oh, I can actually do this. I see myself in this situation. So if it happens like this, it can actually, I can do this. I can change my story this way. The lesson is important. Do not tell that fantastic story and then you hide the lesson. Your story should empower others, not just explain who you are. And so I see this mistake all the time. We over explain who we are. Yes, it's good in building identity, like I said, consistent messaging over time about us, about our story, creates that identity, creates the brand that we are, and then the influence and all that we want over time. But you must avoid over explaining who you are. So at some point, people should know, at some point, the lessons should be clear. So those are just a few mistakes, to avoid. There are more, but those are the ones that I just want to touch on. Now, your stories can impact others, encourage people, be the example that someone follows, be the hope that someone holds on to. So don't say your story is small, your story is not unique, your story is not powerful. It might just be that thing that someone else wants to hear that will change the trajectory of that person's life forever, for good. And then never underestimate the power of your journey. So, as an adult now, I look back and God, I thank you for all the challenges that I went through, that I'm still going through, because it just makes my story interesting. When I talk about myself, like, oh my goodness, there are a lot of stories, because now I can see the uniqueness of my own journey and how I can tell it to impact others. So never underestimate the power of your unique journey, what you went through. So how do we tell our stories in different spaces? Interviews, leadership roles, social media, business branding, mentorship, advocacy. These are just some of the ways that we can share our story, because there must be a way for you to tell your story. I mean, we can't just be telling our story, for storytelling's sake or in a vacuum. We need to share. When you want to share our stories, we use a medium and there's a process. So sometimes it's via interviews. Sometimes it's because of the roles, the leadership roles that you occupy. Of course, social media is there. Your Instagram page, your Facebook, your Twitter, all your your digital assets. And it's your business, to run your business, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, then mentorship as well, which is something I'm, beginning to enjoy doing a lot. Places where your stories can impact. And then advocacy, telling your stories to change perception, to influence policies, like, a lot of these NGOs are doing, and some individuals as well. So these are where you can share your stories, and ensure that the people who need to hear them, and then it makes the impacts that you want, the influence that you want on people. So this is just a short exercise. I just like the classroom, like I said, I like speaking with slides and exercises. So it's a challenge, it's a reflection. Write for yourself, a challenge that shaped you, one lesson it taught you, and one way you can use it to help someone else. At this juncture, I'll say thank you for listening, and I'll take questions if you have any. Thank you. Over to you, Antonia.
Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you so much. That was really, really, really beautiful. Like I said earlier, I have my jotter here, and my jotter is full. I've been writing down. And I'm sure everyone on this call has also been taking down points, taking down nuggets from your session. Thank you once again for joining in today's conversation. So please, if you have any questions for Dr. Rosemary, do well to write it in the chat box. We'll be taking the next speaker now. And once, after the next speaker has finished her session, we'll now have time for question and answers for you to write those questions, and our different